Hello and welcome to this workflow training for Rubex, the next generation of eFileCabinet. The simple definition of a workflow is an automated process which occurs within the Rubex system, especially when a file is uploaded into Rubex. So to begin with, any workflow you need to know what you want to accomplish. In this example, I'm going to show a show of how in a simple accounts payable situation, invoices that are coming in need to be approved and then stored in an appropriate vendor drawer for permanent storage. To begin with, we come here to the menu icon and we go to the admin section because any user who's going to be participating in a workflow needs to have the workflow license assigned to them. Any user who will be managing workflows, meaning creating them, will need to either be an administrator in the system or they need to be a custom user with the ability to manage workflows via the workflow management option. To get to workflows, you just click on the menu icon again and then come here to workflows. And then workflows. I have a fair few of them here, but we're going to create one from scratch. So we click create workflow. Workflows consists of one or more stages, and in these stages you have a number of steps. These steps must be completed before the stage will complete, and you determine what happens when the stage completes. I'm going to name this workflow accounts payable. Next thing I'm going to do is quickly discuss about some workflow settings, especially about notifications. By default, it has a set to send notifications via email when a workflow is created, assigned, and stage approval. Depending on your needs, you may need less or more notifications. So if you click here, you have all these notifications to choose from, including some time frame options. If you're going to be dealing with approvals like with accounts payable, you may, if you're going to do the least amount of permissions, you definitely want to have the stage approval checkbox kept. For this purpose, I'm going to choose to do just created. Like I said, with an approval, you want to most likely keep stage approval and then save your changes. So in this first stage, this first stage will be about when a file, meaning an invoice that needs to be approved, comes into Rubex. This stage I'm going to call invoice to be approved. Each stage that you have, you must select one or more assignees. So I'm going to use the Rubex test user as the assignee. The assignee is in charge of managing the completion of this stage in the workflow. You can have more than one, but if the workflow starts automatically, you want to set one that is default, meaning one that will be doing it by default. The first step in this particular workflow, we click on this little plus sign here. You could do the same thing by clicking this highlighted add step right here. In this case, we're going to put in the step of upload. And then first in this step, we have to select the destination where the file is going to be uploaded to. So I go to this path tab here, and then I define the path. In this case, it's going to be this unapproved invoices drawer within the accounts payable cabinet. After I selected it, it automatically created an asset name titled unapproved invoices after the drawer. This asset comes in handy later on in the workflow. I click done, and you notice any and all assets that you make show up here. An asset is basically just an object that will be referenced through the workflow, especially when the asset will change later on, especially a file. So now I'm going to click on define upload, and the asset type, in this case, I'm going to keep it as single file. In some workflow instances, you may want the asset type to include multiple files. This especially comes into play if files are going to be moved from one location to another. The workflow process will truly begin when there's multiple files being handled. Allow extensions, this is an advanced feature where you can specify the file extensions or file types that this workflow will trigger or will run through, meaning if you only want this workflow to be triggered when a PDF file is uploaded there, then you can control that, where if someone were to upload a Word document into that drawer that we designated, it would not kick off the workflow process. This asset name by default comes up as single file. We can choose to rename it to like invoice as a logical name for what the kind of document that's coming in. The name of the asset doesn't completely matter. So we'll press done. Now this workflow stage is actually one of the easier ones. I'm going to choose move forward. When this stage completes, I'm going to call for it to go to, meaning literally this option of go to, new stage, and then invoices pending approval is what I'm going to call this stage. And as you see, when I did that, it automatically created another stage called stage 2. And then with the available assignees, I'm going to select this test user again. This is where the approval function in workflow comes into play, which is our most common use of workflow. I'm going to check this box for approvers. Approvers can be any user in eFileCabinet. Guest users cannot be an approver or an assignee. They may, of course, upload a file into a location, but they cannot directly participate in a workflow. In approvers, I'm going to select that test user again, but the approver doesn't have to be the default assignee. You may want to have it as an available assignee just in case. You can also designate how many approvals must be met. If just one is needed, then if one person approves it, then after all is said and done, the stage will complete. You can include a message. By default, it just says, is everything all right? But you can define this to whatever you want. For example, is this invoice valid? Or has this invoice been paid? And right here where it says include asset, this gives whoever is approving the document the opportunity to preview the document pending approval, so they don't have to go back to the home screen and then back into this workflow instance. Also in this stage, along with approvers, you can set time frames, meaning how long this workflow can be pending completion. This stage in the workflow can be pending completion before something happens. In this case, I'm going to designate here that in 2 days' time, if nothing has happened, if this stage has not been completed, I'm actually going to have this go to a new stage called pending approval. And in this stage, again I'll just put the assignee back with the test user, but you can have this like as a manager who will be responsible for kicking people into gear. And then in this particular stage, the scenario would call for a step to add to send a message to, say, the manager. I'll just use the test user again. You notice with this particular stage, this send message stage, there's an option to have it execute manually or automatic. With automatic, you would have to have basically the subject and the body filled out. If there's anything that needs to be adjusted, you want the stage to be manual. Meaning you have to you actually have to press a button that says send message when this workflow instance is going through in order for this step to complete. All steps in a stage must be completed for the stage itself to complete. I'm going to mark this stage, this step as automatic. I'm going to put a subject of pending approval with a short message of this invoice has been pending approval for 2 days. And then when this stage completes, I'm going to have it go back to stage 2, so that way any approver has the chance to approve the invoice so the workflow can move forward. Back to stage 2, when you make when you set an approval process, there is actually 2 ways this stage can complete. Meaning when this stage is rejected or approved, you get to define what happens. In this case, if this invoice is rejected, I'm going to have it go to a new stage called rejected invoice. And in this stage, I'm going to have it designate that it notifies someone, in this situation a pretend manager, rejected this invoice has been rejected. In this case, I'm going to actually include the asset, the file, as an attachment in that email, because in the system, I'm going to have a step here to delete the file automatically. In this scenario, the invoice is no longer good or valid, and so we just want to get rid of it. It will go into the recycle bin so you can recover it where needed, but for this purpose, I'm going to have it automatically delete the file after it's been rejected. In this particular stage, I'm going to have it finish the workflow as failed. When you finish a workflow, there's an option to either for it to be succeeded, failed, or terminated. Because one way or another, you want your workflow to finish, otherwise you can't run it. Back here in stage 2, we'll now designate what happens to this stage of the workflow after the approval has been given. In this case, we're going to go to new stage called approved invoice. And we'll come over here. We'll set the assignees. In this stage, we'll designate first, since the invoice has been approved, we're going to set a step for it to automatically rename. And in this case, I want it to rename the document after the invoice number. And so I'm going to select the item to be renamed invoice. And how I capture this information is because of the profile information on the file that will soon be uploaded. When you upload a file, you can put in profile information on it so that by the time it gets to this stage, it'll have that profile information to go off of. To kind of program this, in this new item name field, you click this plus sign here, you click asset, and then in the asset row, you click select to have it reference the invoice single file, the file that's going to be uploaded. And the attribute we're going to grab is the profile item value for the AP invoices profile invoice number. Basically, this coding specifies that it is going to, the workflow will automatically rename this single file to the value of invoice number. Next, I'm going to add a step of create location. I like to think of this step as create/verify location. I'm going to also set this step as automatic. As much as you can get a step to be automatic as possible, do it. And then I'm going to uncheck this box of always create a new location, because this is a function I don't want. If there's a situation that would call for this, then you can use it. I'm going to select the parent path where this location will be, and I'm going to come here to path and then select the vendors cabinet, because ultimately I want the location to either be found or created within these vendor drawers. And so the asset name is actually the name of the cabinet in this case, because this is the parent location to these drawers. So I'll press done, and the name, I'm going to have it go off of a dynamic information based on the profile item value of vendor name. To do so, we click on this plus sign again, asset, select the asset, which is the single file, the invoice, the single file, the attribute, profile item value for the AP invoices profile, and vendor name, and create. Basically, this coding indicates it's going to name or locate the drawer in the vendor's cabinet for the vendor name value. Why I say create or verify? Because as we saw earlier, we have some drawers there like Franklin, Benjamin, Jefferson, Thomas. If the value matches that, because Rubex will not allow for duplicate values, names within a cabinet or within a drawer, meaning you cannot have two drawers of the exact same name, it will verify the location and move forward. And right here, you see a new asset was created right by default. It's called new path of ZZ vendors. I'm going to click on here to rename it to vendor drawer to make it logical, and press done. I'm going to use this asset in the next step. I'm going to add a third step of move. I'll set this step to be automatic. Select the item to move, which is the single file invoice. And the destination, I'm going to select the asset of vendor drawer. So that, in short, after the invoice has been renamed to the invoice number, it's going to move into the appropriate vendor drawer according to the values entered in the vendor name profile item. When this is the last step, and so I'm going to, when this workflow this stage in the workflow completes, I'm going to designate it for it to finish the workflow as succeeded, and I'll press save to save our work. To see what it looks like in a graphical sense, I'm going to click on this eyeball here for workflow preview, and we're going to look at what this workflow is going to look like. Basically, it starts from here. It can finish in 2 points down here, and there is a loop back operation so that we keep the flow going. You won't have your workflow in limbo. So I'm going to press close. Next, we need to come back to the home view. I'll click on my little picture here. By default, the Rubex logo shows here. If you click on here, this takes you straight back home. And on the unapproved invoices drawer, if you remember earlier, this was the drawer that we designated in the upload step that file invoices will be uploaded to. I'm going to click on this bell icon over here on the far right hand side for automation. I'm going to then click the little plus sign up here to add an automation policy to start workflow, a selected workflow, in this case accounts payable, when, and I check the box for file upload. You notice there's a box for remove, meaning when a file is moved from one location within your Rubex account to another, that can trigger a workflow. In this instance, I'm going to only check this box so that this workflow will only start automatically when a file is uploaded there. So I'll press save. And come here to details. Next, we're going to run through a workflow instance. To trigger this, I have the document on my side. On another screen, I'm going to print it to eFileCabinet. You notice there's this file right here waiting to be uploaded. This default name here, I'm not concerned of because we have a step that is going to rename the file anyway. So I'm going to upload this file here, which will trigger the workflow. I'm going to refresh my screen. Well, you notice a little number 1 right here. And under alerts, here is this workflow instance that has been automatically created. This user will also get an email about this with a hyperlink that will take them straight to it. In this instance, since we're already in here, I'm going to click this line item here under alerts to take me to the workflow instance. And this is what the pending approval looks like. I'm going to backtrack because we have some profile information to enter in. So when the file is uploaded, the person can then put in profile information with sufficient time before the approver approves it, so that way profile information can be referenced throughout the workflow. I'm going to click on this quad arrow option here to bring up the dual previewer so we can preview our document and put in and edit profile information at the same time. I'm going to click on this little square with the pencil to edit, and we're going to enter in the information and apply new profile. You see this profile information sticks. I'm going to close the previewer, and I'll go back to the workflow instance. This alert stays here until you dismiss it, so it comes in handy. But the other way to get to workflow instances is to go to the menu, workflows, and then click on instances. I'm going to go with the shortcut method, and I'm going to click back here to get back to the workflow instance. Here is where the approver will look, see this item here, and there's this little eyeball right here that they can preview the document and look at it. In this case, I'm the approver. I look at this. This looks like a good example invoice. Everything is okay to my reckoning, and so I'm going to close this previewer, and then I'm going to click the green thumbs up to approve it. You would click this red thumbs down to reject it. I'm going to click approve. And it loads. And the stage has been approved, and I press OK to confirm this. The workflow has been completed because every other step was automatic. But I'm going to show you the result of this workflow. I come back here to the instance, and we can see kind of a report of it. This last stage, this is the last stage to go through. The file was renamed to 1790 because that was the profile item value for invoice number. It created / verified a location for Franklin, Benjamin, and then moved it there. Where this comes in handy, when we come back to the home screen and refresh, you notice the file is no longer in this unapproved invoices drawer. We expand the vendors cabinet. We click on Franklin, Benjamin, and here is the file right here, renamed exactly what we want, in the location that we want, ready for us to retrieve it whenever needed. This file is put exactly where I want it to be. If I rejected the invoice, the file would be deleted automatically and show up in the recycle bin if I needed to retrieve it later. This is the conclusion of the workflow demonstration.